Hey, welcome back to Connection Point Studies. This is the last in our series. We hope you're having a great time in this whole series of studies. Next week, actually, Ron, is Listen to Music, which we always encourage them to have a big social, fun time, get together and connect together. So that'll be a fun time for them to do. But today, we got a great study plan for them. So let's start with your quote. You always have these. You get them from what? WikiLeaks or what?
WikiQuote.
Oh, WikiQuote.
But
okay.
actually, this one is not a quote. This is a definition
Okay.
from the dictionary, because I was thinking about that word perspective. And it's important to get the definition. It's a particular evaluation of something. So it means a particular evaluation of situation or facts, especially from one person's point of view.
Okay. Okay, that's good. So actually, that goes really well with the discussion question we have for you. We want you to think back 10 years, which is 2001.
Yep.
Where were you? What was your perspective 10 years ago? And how has it changed? Interesting question. This is a chance for you to share. We want you to take 10 or 12 minutes to share around the whole group. If it takes longer, once again, what we say is if they never get to the Bible study, it's more important that they
Connect.
That's right. We want you to connect.
Yeah.
So along with that, before you come back, what do we want them to read?
We want you to look at Romans 8:18 through 31. And just kind of as an overview, don't try to get too detailed here. I just want to, if you could sum it up in one sentence, what's Paul's perspective?
What's his perspective? Okay, Ron, 10 years ago.
Wow.
My life was a little different 10 years ago.
Yeah, I had small kids at home, you know. I had a 3-year-old.
A 3-year-old.
That changed your life, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I had teenagers.
Yeah.
It was different. It was a different world for me, a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm empty nester now, so this is really, our perspective on life is way different.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I changed a lot in 10 years.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, hopefully you had a chance to share a little bit. It'll be kind of fun. It would have been fun to be a plant in the corner of where you were 10 years ago. But as you look at life and that perspective, and as you looked at this scripture, which really talks about perspective, right?
Yeah.
How did we answer that question? How did you sum up Paul's perspective? How did you look at it through his eyes? How would you sum that up?
If I had to sum it up in one sentence, I would say life is tough, but it's going to be worth it.
I love this particular passage that we're going to talk about today. And hopefully they had fun even just reading it.
Oh, yeah.
So let's dig into it. We want them to go verse by verse through it. And so let's start with the first question. What's the hope we're waiting for? Chapter 8, verses 19 through 22. We want you to answer that and we'll come back. Okay, Ron, hope.
Yeah.
Hope is not just a wishy-washy thing. It's
Right.
something that is sure. We have this hope.
And hope is so vital. You know, when you don't have hope, and things are tough,
Yeah.
it's just depressing.
So in the midst of our toughness, in the tough times, in the midst of all of our struggles, Paul says, hang on to hope, right?
Yeah,
What are we hoping for?
And the hope is for God's sons to be revealed. And you go, well, what is that? Well, and he talks about
And daughters,
this,
you'd say
yeah, sons and daughters.
yeah.
I mean, he talks about how this whole creation is under a curse. And scientists actually have a name for this. The physicists call it entropy. And it just means that everything in the universe is, second law of thermodynamics says everything in the universe is running down, it's wearing out, it's degrading, it's decaying.
Not getting better.
No. And so Paul says, he calls this a bondage to decay or corruption. And he says everything is under this curse, and the universe is waiting for this day when that's all going to be ended.
Except for one group of people, the sons and daughters of God.
Right,
To me,
right.
isn't that really what it is? Is there's this whole group that have this hope.
Yeah.
Powerful. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to wait for it? We want you to look at verses 8 through 23 through 25 and think about how you wait correctly for this hope.
So I thought it was interesting that he says, we wait with groaning. He's like, you're going to have some tough times.
Groaning.
You know, groaning. I know one of my favorite preachers says, we groan our way to glory.
Yeah.
You know, the truth is, unless Jesus comes, you and I are going to die. We're going to get old. We're going to get sick. We're going to suffer.
Yeah.
We're going to die. We're groaning.
Yeah, my dad says, you got to be tough to get old.
It's true. It is so true. And he says, but we wait for it patiently. So we just have to trust that God's going to make this right in the end. If one day I get sick and I'm dying, I just have to wait for it patiently.
So we have to have patience in that whole process. And one of the great things is we're not doing this alone. Really, it talks about it in the next question we want you to focus on. How does the Spirit help us in this process of waiting? And look at verses 26 and 27 as you look at that, and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, answer that, Ron. How would you do that?
You know, it's just so great because he just painted a little bit of a depressing picture, like, hey, we're groaning and all of this, but we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
The Bible says the Spirit helps us in our weakness. And that term weakness just literally is a picture of, it literally means without strength. Here we are, people without strength. We could not hack this on our own. And he comes along in a couple of ways. One way is we don't know what we're supposed to do. We really, sometimes we are without direction, but the Spirit gives us direction.
Daily.
Yeah, and he says the Spirit intercedes for us. The picture is he's praying for you, interceding on your behalf.
It's so powerful because I think even while there's times that we groan our way through life, there's some wonderful, sweet times when the Spirit of God comes and helps us, and we never thought we'd have the strength, and all of a sudden we just break through. We make it in the midst of tough times sometimes. And
you know, and I've absolutely experienced this. 13, 14 years ago, we had a son that died.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how I was going to make it through there, but I felt literally in that time the Spirit holding us up. That is hard to explain, but I couldn't have made it through without that.
I've seen God do that time and time and time with me through this process of planting this church. There's just been times when I am beside myself. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm groaning my way to glory. And then God comes along, and there's so much joy when we see God come through, which is really what this is all about. So as we look at the next question, what do we want to focus on?
The next question is great. Romans 8:28. One of the most famous verses in the Bible, and people love to quote it, you know, God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that verse is so often misunderstood. I want to ask, what is this really promising?
Yeah. What is it promise? Okay. All right, I have my opinions on this verse. I've preached a lot on this verse.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't say that he won't let bad things happen to you, does it?
No, and in fact, what you have to step back is and say, what does the good mean? And I think in this context, Paul would say, the good means God's glory.
So he's going to use even bad things, even sins. See, I run into people that have a family member murdered, or a rape in their family, or you have all of these terrible sins that other people put on them that they didn't even choose. And you say, how's that going to work for good?
Yeah.
And he finds a way to do that if we let him, right?
Right. It's the ultimate
hope.
good. Yeah, it's the ultimate good. And when you're in that place where painful things have happened to you, you have to trust. You may not see it or experience in that moment, but ultimately God uses it for good.
He does. He just does. So we get to this last question. How would you summarize Paul's answer to the question? What shall we say about these things?
Again, he's asking a question.
He's asking a question, but verse 831 is pretty powerful. And so how do you summarize the whole thing? And we'll come back and talk about it. All right, Ron, how do you summarize? This is a great passage. I love
Yeah.
this passage.
I think I would summarize this by saying, don't doubt it. Ultimately, God's gonna do whatever He has to do to bring us into His presence. And the Bible paints this picture like, who can ascend the hill of
Yeah.
the Lord? You know, clean hands, pure heart. You have to be pure, spotless, blameless. I'm none of those things.
Yeah.
And Paul's saying, you can count on it. There's nothing can separate you. It doesn't matter. Whatever it takes, God's going to deliver you into His presence.
To me, this whole passage has, in the summary for me, is there's nothing can separate you from the presence of God, which is the solution for the sin in your life, for every part of your life. If we keep God in the forefront and we follow Him in that relationship, He will use and make everything better. And ultimately, in
Absolutely.
eternity, He settles all the accounts. It's just powerful.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way for us to kind of close this whole series. My hope is that you've developed your relationship with God even deeper. And that's our hope, is that you guys pray for each other as you work on your relationship with God. So again, one last chance for you to pray together. And remember, next week, take time and kind of organize a fellowship, a party, a good time to celebrate. We really believe in the core value of celebration. It's a part of our connection groups. And so take a chance and have a big party and invite some friends. And we'll see you next time at Connection Point Studies.